How's everyone doing? We doing all right today? How y'all doing? Yep, haven't been on for a few days. Had a good Christmas. Got together with my daughter and my uncle and aunt. So yeah, I had a good Christmas, and I'm looking forward to a really good New Year. I try to do news updates 4 or 5 days a week, whenever there's news breaking, and I do a lot of political commentary. Today's spotlight is going to be President Trump's most recent executive order that has a lot of people scratching their heads. They're trying to figure out, what is this executive order all about? Lots of theories. I'm going to kind of explain some of the theories and why I think some of them may or may not be valid. News of the day. One of the news things that I find interesting is that the president is getting a train station near the Western Wall named after him, which is, not bad for a president who's been accused of being a Nazi. I think that's actually kind of cool. So one of the things that is, I think is cool, it's good that they're honoring the president. Trump has really been a friend to Israel, and I think that's pretty cool. And they're showing their honor to him by naming the train station after him. The other thing that I wanted to talk about that I just find interesting is this news story on CNN about the magnolia tree at the White House that is sick and damaged and is probably going to have to be removed. And when I read the article, I was shocked. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the article for you. And this is the assessment from people from the National Arboretum. They said the overall architecture of this tree and the structure is greatly compromised, and the tree is completely dependent on artificial support. Without the extensive cabling system, the tree would have fallen years ago. The tree is being propped up by cables. Presently, and very concerning, the cabling system is failing on the east trunk as the cable has pulled through the very thin layer of wood that remains. It's difficult to predict when and how many more will fail the cables. And if you remember, a couple of months ago, we talked about this dream that I had where I saw all these trees falling in this woods, and they had been dead for a long time, and they were being propped up, and it was time for them to come down, and they had to be cleared out. And I interpreted that dream as symbolically speaking of the swamp, people in Congress, corrupt politicians, corrupt people in the deep state who need to be removed. Well, I read this article and I just thought, wow, this is like almost like prophetic confirmation of what I saw in my dream, that there's this big tree. It's been essentially been mostly dead for a long time. Maybe not all dead, but mostly dead. And it is in danger of hurting people if it isn't removed. And it's being held up artificially. So I just found that incredibly interesting. Is it a confirmation? I don't know exactly. But I do know that there's a lot of dead wood in government that is being removed, that is being taken out. So on December 21st, the president issued an executive order, and the title of the order is Blocking the Property and Persons Involved in Serious Human Rights Abuse or Corruption. And the subtitle is the Global Magnitsky Act. So people have been wondering about this presidential executive order. Why, number one, why hasn't it been reported on by the press? It came out on the 21st. Today is the 27th. It's been 6 days. And there isn't really much that's being reported on, although Politico did have an article on it this morning, I noticed. It hasn't received a lot of press coverage. So some people are asking why. Why isn't the press reporting on this? Why don't they find it interesting? And of course, some people think that that it is a danger to the deep state, and because the media is controlled by the deep state, the media doesn't want to report on it. That's a possibility. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. The executive order does declare a national emergency concerning human rights abuse and corruption. And what does it mean when the president declares a national emergency? What it really means is it gives the president and Congress the ability to devote extra resources to combating the situation that has been declared a national emergency. Congress can appropriate more funding. They can put more law enforcement resources to work on that problem. When the president wrote his executive order on opioid addiction, he declared a state of national emergency. What did that do? That gave them, the DEA and the Department of Justice, Department of Health, the ability to devote more resources to it because it was declared a state of national emergency. So the national emergency thing really allows government to devote more resources to solving the problem. I'm not going to read the act. You can find it on the White House. You can search for it if you want to. Other people have read the order. I'm not going to do that today. I have some other things I'd like to cover that have to do with the act. It's an executive order. There is an attached document called an annex, which is a list of about, I think, 16 or 17 people around the world. And then there are a couple of other attachments that go with it. And you can look all that stuff up if you want. What it really does is it freezes the assets and property of people who have been found to be involved in human rights abuse, human trafficking, and corruption. And it was, and so I'm going to start out with, why hasn't the press reported on it? Here's one possible explanation as to why the press hasn't reported on it. This act is essentially an extension of the Magnitsky Act that was passed by Congress in 2012. That bill was passed by Congress as a means to punish Russian officials for the death of Sergei Magnitsky, who was a Russian lawyer who was beaten to death in a Russian prison. It really allowed us, it was a way to get even with or get back at Russia for the way they treated this lawyer. And yes, this is the same Magnitsky Act that I think the Russian attorney who met with Don Trump Jr. in Trump Tower, Veselnitskaya, she was coming over to the U.S. to try to get some softening of the language of the Magnitsky Act. So that's the act that we're talking about. Well, so this act was made a law in 2012. In 2016, last year, a year ago in December, it was expanded by Congress. And it wasn't just applied to Russia, it became the Global Magnitsky Act. So some of the press might be looking at this and saying, well, this is just an extension, or it's the executive branch agreeing with something that's already in place. Congress has already passed this bill. It was expanded to have a global scope a year ago. Now the White House is just affirming that they're on board with it. So maybe the press is saying, there's nothing to report. It's not really a big deal. It's old news. That's one possible explanation as to why the press isn't reporting on it. Some believe that this act is a way for the Treasury Department, because the act puts together the Treasury Department, State Department, and the Department of Justice to freeze the assets and property and prosecute people involved in human rights abuse, human trafficking, and corruption. And it doesn't just apply to the people on the listed in the annex. It applies to anyone, foreign or domestic, that the State Department, Justice Department, and Treasury Department all agree they fit the definition in this act. So it could apply to literally anyone. Some people believe that it is targeting the Clinton Foundation. When I first read it, when it came out, I saw some things in there that led me to believe, okay, this is a takedown of the Clinton Foundation. That's what this is. Now, why did I think that? I think that I came to that conclusion because I have confirmation bias, and most of us do. your confirmation bias is just going to lead you into drawing conclusions that confirm what you already think. That's what confirmation bias does. So one guy on Twitter named Kyle went through the list of people, did some research on them, and he was able to tie some of them to the Clintons, but not all of them. So some people are kind of the opinion, the belief, that this is an attempt or a measure by the White House to go after the Clinton Foundation. And they're related people in crime syndicates and in international figures who are related to the Clinton Foundation. And there's a lot of them. The Clinton Foundation is deep. It is wide. It reaches a lot of places. It involves a lot of people. And I'm going to just discuss briefly some of the people that are listed in the annex. There's this guy named Yahya Jammeh, former president of Gambia, who came to power in 1994 during a CIA-led coup, and he stepped down this year. They have a new democratically elected president. This guy has a long history of engaging in theft of the resources from the country, corruption, intimidation, and torture of his opponents. He's a bad guy, so he's listed. Dan Gertler is listed. He is an Israeli billionaire who actually made his fortune through corrupt mining and oil deals in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He got in tight with the president years ago. He agreed to loan the president, I think, $20 million to arm his military forces to put down an insurrection. In exchange, Gertler got exclusive rights to the diamond mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And he has been doing some crooked deals ever since then. So he's listed. Slobodan Tesik is on the list. He is among the biggest arms dealers in the Balkans. Spent almost 10 years on the United Nations no-fly list for selling arms to terrorist organizations. Mukhtar Hamid Shah is an interesting person on the list. Pakistani kidney transplant doctor who has been arrested and indicted on numerous cases of kidnapping and holding people against their will and doing forced kidney transplants on Pakistani laborers. He's got a long history of this. So these are the types of people that are listed on this annex, and these are the types of people globally that they're going to go after with this, this order. Although the Clinton Foundation has been involved in some very, what I would say is corrupt activities over the years. November 9th of last year, donations to the Clinton Foundation went to just about zero. As soon as people found out that Hillary lost the election, the Clinton Foundation lost nearly all of its donors. And I remember seeing an article a couple of weeks after the election that the Clinton Foundation closed up its offices and laid off or fired all of its staff. The Clinton Foundation, as we have known it for the last 10 years, is not what it used to be. And this is how you know that the Clinton Foundation was a pay-for-play operation. It wasn't just like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which has been around forever and receives a lot of donations year in and year out. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, their donations don't come and go based on elections. The Clinton Foundation, as soon as Hillary lost the election, boom, no more donations. Because the people who were donating to the Clinton Foundation knew that if Hillary got elected, they were going to get political favors. And as soon as she lost, there was no expectation of political favors anymore. And the Clinton Foundation essentially closed up shop. That's how you know it was a pay-for-play operation. So that also helps us understand that the Clinton Foundation itself doesn't have the power that it used to because it doesn't have the funding. It's hard to do anything without money. And the Clinton Foundation raised hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially billions of dollars in the past, but they have lost a lot of their funding. So I question how much this is really going after the Clinton Foundation. Maybe it's going after something bigger than the Clinton Foundation. Well, what's bigger than the Clinton Foundation? Well, let me tell you where I think this is going. The night of December 21st, the night the executive order came out, I had two dreams about the CIA. And I don't often have dreams about the CIA or I have been having more dreams about the intelligence community, actually. But two dreams about the CIA. And I'll tell you about one of the dreams. In the dream, I saw how the CIA had infiltrated the media to an extent that I had no idea. I just couldn't conceive that the media was that pervasively infiltrated by the CIA. It was scary in the dream. And so I suspect that the dreams about the CIA was God telling me maybe this executive order is actually about the CIA. All right. So now I'm going to take you down a little rabbit trail. By the way, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't watch Alex Jones. I'm not really into conspiracy theories. Just don't have time to go running down rabbit trails. I try to focus on the things that God is speaking to me about. And I try to wait and take a wait and see attitude on a lot of these things. Right. Project Mockingbird. Exactly. Operation Mockingbird. We know years ago, the intelligence community infiltrated the media. And this was a very successful campaign by the intelligence community to spread propaganda into the culture. And I think it was last year or 2 years ago, Barack Obama actually signed an executive order officially making it policy for the government to allow its agents to go into the press and spread propaganda. And if you aren't aware that there are a lot of CIA and intelligence operatives in the media, there are a lot of them. They are there. And I did not know the extent to which they were there until I had this dream. So, little history on the CIA. In 1953, with the help of British government, the Eisenhower administration did essentially a coup of Iran's government. Even though Harry Truman, the previous president, had fears about the precedent that would be set if we had a CIA-led coup of a foreign country, Eisenhower went through with it with the help of Churchill and the British intelligence. And this is available, it's publicly available documents. 4 years ago in 2013, 60 years after the coup, the CIA admitted it was in charge of the planning and execution of the coup, including the bribing of Iranian politicians, security and army high-ranking officials, as well as disseminating pro-coup propaganda. And this is what the CIA said, and I'll quote, and how they carried this out. Under CIA direction and as an act of U.S. foreign policy, conceived and approved at the highest levels of government. And if you're interested, the classified documents on that operation were declassified a few years ago. You can find them if you look for them on the internet, about the CIA-led coup in Iran. It was a dangerous precedent because ever since then, American foreign policy has centered around regime change. We have toppled one government after another, after another, after another. And why do we do it? What's the purpose of regime change? Why do we go in every place from Vietnam to Afghanistan to Iraq and Iran? Why are we interested in getting rid of leaders and other governments? It mostly has to do with money. Follow the money. And with that in mind, I'm going to play a video clip. And this is, some of you have probably heard this before. This is General Wesley Clark, who was commander of NATO forces in Kosovo, and how he became aware that the deep state had developed an official foreign policy of regime change.
What happened in 9/11 is we didn't have a strategy, we didn't have bipartisan agreement, we didn't have American understanding of it, and we had instead a policy coup in this country. A coup. A policy coup. Some hard-nosed people took over the direction of American policy, and they never bothered to inform the rest of us. I went through the Pentagon 10 days after 9/11. I went back there to see Don Rumsfeld. I'd worked for him as a White House fellow in the 1970s. All this is in the book. And I said, am I doing okay on CNN? He said, yeah, fine. He said, I'm thinking about it. He says, I read your book. And he said, this is a book that talks about the Kosovo campaign. And he said, I just want to tell you, he said, nobody's going to tell us where or when we can bomb. Nobody. He said, I'm thinking of calling this a floating coalition. What do you think about that? I said, well, sir, thanks for reading my book. And, he said, thanks, that's all the time I've got. Really. And I went downstairs. I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know. He said, I said, well, did they tie Saddam to 9/11? He said, no. He said, but I guess they don't know what to do about terrorism, and so they think, but they can attack states, and they want to look strong, and so I guess they think if they take down a state, it will intimidate the terrorists. And you know, it's like that old saying, he said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem has to be a nail. Well, I walked out of there pretty upset. And then we attacked Afghanistan. I was pretty happy about that. We should have. And then I came back to the Pentagon about 6 weeks later. I saw the same officer. I said, why haven't we attacked Iraq? We still going to attack Iraq? He said, oh, sir. He says, it's worse than that. He said, he pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office that says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. I said, 7 countries in 5 years. I said, is that a classified memo? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. He was about to show it to me. He said, because I want to talk about it. And I sat on this information for a long time, for about 6 or 8 months. I was so stunned by this, I couldn't begin to talk about it. And I couldn't believe it would really be true, but that's actually what happened. This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld, and you could name a half-dozen other collaborators from the Project for a New American Century. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control. Now, did anybody ever tell you that? Was there a national dialogue on this? Did senators and congressmen stand up and denounce this plan? Was there a full-fledged American debate on it? Absolutely not. And there still isn't.
So that was General Clark, by the way, who was commander, as I said, of the NATO forces in Kosovo. And when the Defense Department, the State Department, and the Deep State decide that our foreign policy is going to be to overthrow one government after another, that involves the CIA. The CIA is all over the world. They're doing, in Afghanistan, the poppy fields in Afghanistan are being guarded by American troops. That the heroin and opium that is being sold that comes from Afghanistan is funding the CIA. The CIA does drug sales, arms sales, and a lot of other things to fund their black ops, to get funding for things that Congress will not approve, not allow them to do. And fortunately, we heard from one of the generals in Afghanistan that Trump has issued a new, Mattis has issued a new policy in Afghanistan, and they're actually destroying some of the production facilities in Afghanistan and trying to shut down the opium production. But that's a pervasive problem, and it's good for us to hear that, because that helps take funding away from corrupt organizations like the CIA and their black ops. Now, a couple of years ago, Monica Peterson went down to Haiti after the disaster down there, which was cleaned up in large part by the Clinton Foundation. And Monica Peterson went to investigate these 33 girls who were being trafficked out of Haiti. And while she was there, she disappeared. The girls were trafficked by Laura Silsby. She was defended by a team of Clinton attorneys who got her off on her charges. And she's actually, last I heard, she was working in Idaho somewhere in some county or state government. But there's been a lot of question about what is going on in Haiti, what's been going on down there under the cover of darkness, where there's very poor information and we don't really know what's been happening. Well, George Webb went down there and he did some investigation. He did a series, and I'm going to play a video clip of what George Webb found when he went to Haiti. And this will give you a little taste of what is going on down there.
Okay, day 105, the DynCorp harvest. If you've been watching the series, you'll note how I talk about the black budget. DynCorp is one of the CIA cutouts for covert operations, and one of the patterns that has come out in this series is you start with this corporation called Otpor, or think tank in Serbia now, and these were the key guys that were behind the Kosovo revolution, creating Kosovo from Serbia, and were key in the organ harvesting and setting up kind of the organ harvesting operation that still goes on today, I believe. But it's about getting a gang to disrupt the country. In this case, this would be Muslim Brotherhood that Hillary used for Libya and Syria. And then what you do is you have a counter move by, NATO, usually in Europe, that puts down the revolt, and now you have a lot of soldiers that you can train as police officers to do all sorts of things, really organized crime. And DynCorp has all those contracts, so that's where DynCorp comes in. This is Pug Winokur, who's kind of the real heart and soul of DynCorp, and then you can see the soldiers here. It's basically Operation Chaos, or the Chaos Company. And that enables a whole bunch of things, like the population can then be tested for viruses and vaccines. So you test some new virus to maybe make the immune system weaker, and then you test a vaccine to see if it works. Sex trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, organ trafficking, every kind of trafficking you think of, and then setting up harvesting operations. And this has happened in Kosovo, it happened in Congo, it happened all over Central Sub-Saharan Africa, and now it kind of has moved to Haiti. This whole idea of not going through Congress, Hillary hired Sid Blumenthal, who is in this company with General Grange here, this Osprey Global, and by going through an intermediary like France, they were able to avoid what's called a finding. The United States, for covert operations, if you're going to do a Bay of Pigs or whatever, you're going to have to submit a finding to this group of 8, the Gang of 8 intelligence senators that sit on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and they have to approve it. So this didn't go through that process at all. There's no paper trail whatsoever for this. Unlike Bay of Pigs, or these other things that we can go back and we can do a Freedom of Information Act and see what the heck we're doing. So nothing has changed. It's just they've just created more loopholes. But it always comes down to this organ harvesting. And what I think has really changed is the CIA has had all these experiments through the Rockefeller Foundation and so forth to kind of try to improve the take, if you will, the ROI of war. And that's the human organs. So constantly funding foundations to see how we can do transplants, how we can make the transplants last longer, the drugs to develop, the immunosuppressants, everything. So I think that's the one thing that keeps coming through here. I mentioned Popovic from Otpor. Here he is. You know, he has a nice PR presence when he comes to New York, but he leads these kind of hate sessions, if you will, in Kosovo and different places for different groups, and he gets them to think that, you know, organ harvesting from your enemies is okay. These are Syrian prisoners, so the Otpor is a part of the Syrian operation with the white helmets. That's basically what now again, most of the white helmets during the day are good guys, but the white helmets at night are the bad guys. They're the ones that are removing the hearts and putting in people in DynCorp body bags. And then also, you know, the psychology is, and I admit the Serbs did horrible things, you know, burning people in closets and stuff like that. But it's this gang, counter-gang idea. This is the same thing the CIA did in Los Angeles. Have the Bloods do something bad and then the Crips do something bad. That produces bodies, and the bodies are harvested. So, like I said, you can just Google DynCorp and organ harvesting. You can find out all the different places they've been involved in that. But they're using the kids. These two things go together. They use these kids in the United States to set up these sex sting operations, and then they convince revenge groups in the United States that these people that engage in sex with these people should be harvested or whatever. But they don't actually have enough of those people who are that sick to do that, so they convince these revenge groups that these people do it anyway. So that's the interesting thing that I've been finding in my research. So I'm going to say here that Nous sommes frères et sœurs, the Laura Silsby Hospital here, these are all sick kids. And I think what's happening is they're going up here to Mirabile. They've got a huge CAT scanner up here. Also, this is Katie. This has been fogged out in the photographs. And the reason, this is the kind of thing that kind of CAT scanner could produce. They're actually sizing up the size of the kid's organs so they can figure out if the donor is a match, okay? So, and then there's the hospitals and so forth and cruise ships and stuff up here to the north. I'm more focused now. I'm doing a lot of research. There's other heart transplant places here in Fignon and Milot, where they admit doing heart transplants. Here it is, Milot. Right? I think hospital ships are going to be your excellent surgeons teaching in-country surgeons how to do these transplants. And the idea is to push it out so that you can make money from every country doing these surgeries. Okay, that's the idea of the touring hospital ships. And this is an old idea that has been written about with sending the body bags back with contraband inside them. So Haiti, I'm going to say Africa is going to be the kind of source for the Middle East for organs. Kosovo is kind of the source for Europe and NATO. But Haiti is kind of this different thing. It's not only a source of organs, but it's also a source of lots of testing. You're going to see waves and waves of virus and vaccine testing, and you're going to have these body bags being sent in two directions. So body bags are going to be going to the CDC, where they're going to be doing the slicing. Okay, so I think it's both of those things. It's both a source of organs and a source of research to see how these vaccine virus combinations affected when the victim dies. And again, we have Kathy O'Brien saying that, you know, she witnessed the drug running and virus testing. So I'm going to say that Laura Silsby, this sex trafficking is only part of the story. She's transporting kids up to this northwest part of Haiti because they're organ donors. There's going to be hospitals over here. I'm going to bet they're going to be right over here on the northeast corner of Dominican Republic. She's taking sick kids that are about ready to die because they want to do that live transfer. Now the beautiful kids go somewhere else. They fly over to St. James Island, Jeffrey Epstein's Island. But the 33 kids, they were going for organ harvest, is what I think. Or they can use them as sex slaves until they're ready for harvesting. Both of those are true. But these kids are sick, and that's what leads me to believe that they've been monitored all through their sickness. So there's a CIA agent there, Conway. And the flip side of this is, well, they're going to die anyway. So we're just giving new life to another family, you know. So there's all these rationalizations that go along with this, but that's what I believe is going on.
All right. That was George Webb from his YouTube channel. And as I said, George, investigative reporter, has been looking into a lot of different things, looked heavily into the Clinton Foundation, has looked into a lot of different things that are going on now. And when I saw that one guy on the annex, the Pakistani doctor who is doing kidney transplants, a little bell went off, and I was like, wait a minute, I've seen this before. So I think, okay, when you look at this executive order, it is an executive order to take down human trafficking, human rights abuse, and corruption. What is this that we just saw going on in Haiti? There is no clearer example of human rights abuse and corruption than that kind of operation, which George says is essentially a CIA black op operation. To me, and this is my hope is that this executive order would be used to stop those kinds of operations. That's the kind of thing that needs to stop. They know it's happening. They know it's going on. And look, corrupt organizations like the Clinton Foundation are relatively short-lived. They come and go. The CIA has been profiting off of human suffering for decades. The CIA and the deep state, they use politicians to gain power, influence, and money. It's not the politicians that are really the most dangerous thing. It's the institutions like the CIA and other deep state organizations. And I think, it's my theory, that Trump's executive order, if it's going to be used to do anything, I think it's going to be used to help defund the black operations of the deep state. And my theory is that, look, Trump doesn't have a great relationship with the CIA. When he went to Langley and had his famous meeting with the CIA, he talked about the columns in the room, but he was also talking about the fifth column. And a fifth column is a group of people inside of an agency that is there to subvert the overall operational goals and objectives of the agency. They're essentially counterinsurgency. And there are people in the CIA who are doing things counter to what the president wants to do. It wasn't a coincidence that the president took Mike Flynn with him when he went to visit the CIA. Flynn has been a longtime member of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and there is no love lost between the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency. They don't like each other. They compete for resources, and they have different objectives. When the president started to surround himself with a lot of generals, General Mattis, General Kelly, General Flynn, some people took that as a sign that he was going to go to war. If a president surrounds himself with military leaders, you think, oh, he's going to go to war. But the interesting thing about these generals is many of them really don't want us to go to war. I think that the generals and his people in the Defense Intelligence Agency sat down with Trump and said, look, our biggest problem is the CIA and their black ops. And we have to find a way to defund what they're doing and minimize the damage. And I suspect that, and it's my hope, that the president and his people will take this executive order and relieve human suffering and corruption in deep state organizations like the CIA. And some would argue that every president since Kennedy has been a tool of the CIA. And people would argue that Kennedy was assassinated because he wouldn't go along with the CIA's plans. Some would say Reagan was not used by the CIA, but if you say that, you have to think about the Iran-Contra scandal. Reagan was influenced by the CIA. He may have been an unwilling partner, but virtually every president has been controlled by the deep state. And the CIA probably had its maximum influence with Bush Sr. He was the director of the CIA before he was president. So Trump is the guy that the CIA can't push around. He can't be blackmailed. They're not going to do a brownstone operation on him. They don't have any dirt on him. And I think that really irritates them. And I don't think it's a coincidence that John Brennan, former director of the CIA, got on Twitter and started tweeting against the president on December 21st, the day the executive order came out. I was surprised. I've seen Comey, I've seen Sally Yates and Ben Rhodes and Eric Holder and a lot of other people on Twitter tweeting against the president. But John Brennan showed up on Twitter on December 21st, the day this executive order came out. He gets on and starts tweeting at the president. And I thought, what is going on? Is that a coincidence that Brennan just gets on Twitter and starts going after Trump? That kind of thing, to me, is a tip-off that maybe the CIA knows that they're at war with the president. And so that brings us to our prayer. If you want to pray about something, we should pray for the president. We should pray for the generals. We should pray for his cabinet, pray for the White House, and the good people in Congress who are trying to expose these deep state monsters and get them out and drain the swamp. That is what our prayer needs to be. If you want to pray about something, I would get on that. All right. Well, I don't have a whole lot more for you. Yeah, Clapper, he'll see his day in court too. I think all of the deep state operatives I think they're running scared. I think they're concerned that they're going to be outed. They're seeing what's happening in the FBI. They see what's happening in the DOJ. And I think they know that their time is short. So that's my theory. If you want more news and information, you can go to my website, freedomnewsproject.com. All of my updates are posted there. I have the latest video, news and commentary from people like Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Laura Ingraham. I have White House press briefings are there. Trump's Twitter is there. I have a lot of resources on freedomnewsproject.com. You can go there and look around and see if there's anything there that is good for you. Some people go there daily and they catch up on, I have Rush Limbaugh's podcast is there. I have a lot of Michael Savage's podcast is there. There's a lot of podcasts, a lot of videos. It's all free. You guys can go there and check all that stuff out. I hope you have found this update informative. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting me financially. I love you all, and I will catch you on the next broadcast.